great pleasure to have John Searle here with me, and John lives a bit north of Auckland in New Zealand. So we spoke with somebody from the north of the South Island the other day, a few days ago, and today we're talking to somebody in the north of the North Island. And John is the operator of a large outdoor event which runs once a year, or there's a couple of associated things associated with it, but it's historically been hundreds of thousands of people that come to this event. And so John has some real insight into what's sitting in behind the processes around groups of people coming together and how that actually works. And clearly, obviously, in the context of the corona outbreak, is that, well, in this country here, there's a $200,000 fine if you congregate together. So I imagine there's similar legislation being placed put in place in New Zealand as well. And, you know, like it's a tremendous limitation. So, John, I wonder if you could introduce yourself. Feel free to speak a little bit about your inner journey, your spiritual journey as well, and you know, just introduce how you got to the situation where you are dealing, you know, relatively routinely over many years now, with events that involve hundreds of thousands of people, and you know, what your viewpoint is around that. So, like, you know, just how you're seeing all of that.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, I've been in the event industry, I suppose, for the last 35 years, and in New Zealand would have done, you know, on an annual basis, the largest annual gatherings of people together. What's been neat about that is that they are also free events to the public, and really the event industry has grown up around us. When we started these things off 30 years ago, we were the biggest thing in town. There wasn't a lot else around, really, and so we built up a really good reputation for free, safe, large scale, and you know, high quality concerts, and primarily made up of family groupings and friends, and so we're not just totally youth orientated. It's people across generations, and I think some of those things make a difference. So we've been around for a long time, so we're part of the fabric of the event community, but also the society. People have been coming to our events for a long time. So they have expectations about what they're coming to, expectations about, you know, the safety around them, and just the atmosphere that is created by that. So, you know, you bring that with you. And of course, now we're in this environment where the main event I'm involved with doesn't happen until way later in the year. So personally, not incredibly affected, but I see all the industry around me really affected. So just like in Australia, you know, all gatherings have been banned. All permits have been revoked. We're now in the position where, you know, the local gym, the swimming pool, everything's shut down. So we are basically in a lockdown situation. And all the people I know in the event industry, whether they be musicians or sound companies, lighting technicians or whatever, there's no work. And that's a big thing. That's a very, very big thing, because they're all, you know, a lot of them are employers. A lot of the industry, particularly in the musician side of things, people live, you know, fairly hand to mouth, and they're looking for gigs to occur all the time. So that raises a lot of unease in society, for sure. As I say, personally, the main event I'm involved with we'll see what happens over time. We're not too concerned right here now because things can change, and we'll see if it does change. And because of our experience, we can put things together, relatively quickly. And I think that if we get out, be able to get up and going later in the year, the appetite for people to come together is going to be huge, because people miss these sorts of things. I mean, in New Zealand, we're in the late summer, and a lot of our festivals and a lot of our community events were kind of almost at the peak, but there was still a lot to happen. So already people, have really missed not getting together. And I'm not just talking about, the weddings or going down to the pub. I'm talking about these bigger gatherings, 3-day events, a night event, or whatever it is. It's part of the way we interact with each other these days, and that's become an important part. Yeah.
The other thing that I know is a really big feature of New Zealand is sporting events, and actually following sporting is huge in New Zealand.
Yeah.
And the big season, the winter season, is actually just about due to kick off, if it's not already kicked off. And how are people, how's the person on the street actually, how are they affected? How are they responding to that?
Well, Neil, that rugby is a religion in New Zealand, and whereas it might be football elsewhere. So when you take away those sorts of things, because yes, there's no sport, there's no organised sport. My own son plays senior rugby here, and the team can't get together any longer. And that is, once again, part of the social fabric for him, his teammates, the way they bond together, the way they look after each other, the language they use. I mean, it runs quite deep. And now the people who are participating, of course, there's a huge number of others who aren't participating. They are viewers, and I'd count myself as one of them. So the irony of the situation is now that we're all in lockdown, you turn to the telly and there's none of your beloved sport there to watch anyway. So these are big wake-up calls, really. They're not just little tremors; they're big tremors, and maybe that is what is required around the place right now. So, yeah, people are having to change, do things a bit differently.
Well, you're talking there about all the, it's the big things, but it's also the reflection of the big things, actually. I'm talking about events, like the huge sporting events in New Zealand, and it's massive there, it's absolutely massive. But it comes all the way down, as you say, to, a school group wanting to play sport or something like that. And as you say, it's actually a community, it's a team, and the languaging and the cultural interactions are tremendous, and the whole thing's just been put on shutdown. It's absolutely shut down. So what would you view as being, the alternate space? So what is it that people are doing? And, would you have any recommendations for people to how do they actually manage the trauma that there's no football to go to watch or rugby to go to watch or whatever else? How do you actually, what would you say to people around all of that? What can they do? What resources do they actually reach for?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, you can tell by my grey hair that I'm not a young fella. So even just participating in this technology that we're using right now is a little bit different for me. But this is the point, you're learning new things all the time. So many of us are starting to turn to other ways of interacting, and a lot more of it is via these sorts of mechanisms. So yes, people are replacing the physical getting together with more of an online getting together, I suppose. but that requires a bit of a shift, and some generational things go along with that. As I say, I'm just not quite so used to it as my children would be, but one can learn and share. But I think the other big thing, of course, that happens is that you turn to your own inner being, really, I suppose, because you're relying more on that than you are from the community at large, if you know what I mean. You look to use your own resources more. And that's something that I suppose, once again, because of my age group, maybe because of some of the things that I'm interested in, I've been transitioning anyway. So for me personally, the idea of a lockdown or being so-called isolated isn't quite so scary as it would be for others who, many of us seem to need interaction the whole time, an escape, something to fill into our life. Whereas, I'm a family person. I love to have interaction, but you also have to have a space inside yourself that is strong enough to be able to exist without it. That's a harder task for people, but I think that's one of the things that we all have to learn.
Sure. Well, it's very, very interesting what you're touching on here, and for many reasons. But one of them is that the effect of what's happening is separation, and so like people listening to you, they may confuse what you're talking about to an urge to be separate. So like, I don't like other people, and so therefore I'm going to separate from them, or I'm frightened of them. They might be going to give me a disease, or steal the last bag of flour at the supermarket, as I was hearing from somebody else earlier today. Yep. And there's that urge to separate. Now, that's a very, very different thing to what you're talking about. So I wonder if you could just sort of talk a little bit around that issue of separation as opposed to being self-reliant or being responsible for yourself.
Well, you're describing it really. No, I'm not talking about being a hermit. I'm not talking about hiding away. I'm not talking about avoiding people because of an innate fear of myself that I might catch something, or that interaction could be bad for me. It's more a learning over time to live with yourself, to use your own resources rather than just be reacting all the time to other people, to other things. There is quite a big difference. There's something that is a bit more in control within yourself compared to being pushed and pulled by everything that's happening around you. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, you are. So, this could probably be distilled into, a couple of points for people watching, about, the advice of John Searle as to how to better manage. So, we are sharing, with a lot of people here, and what we're sharing is the opposite of the separation process. So we're doing the other thing, to what, dare I say it, the huge majority of people are just going into mass separation because of the, the fear and the panic and all the rest of it. But could you just try and distill that down? So like, you're talking about the process of becoming stronger within yourself as actually being a way to actually manage the situation. That's fundamentally what you're talking about. I don't know if you could just sort of fill that out a little bit, or I don't want to put words into your mouth, but it's I can feel that there's a really important point here which could be made.
Yeah, I mean, I think it starts off, many years ago about I'm not saying fending for yourself or standing on your own 2 feet, but that's part of it. And it's building up a core inside you that has some strength, some security of its own, so you're not buffeted as much. Let's face it, things that happen around us still affect us, and I'm one of them. But it's seeing a bigger picture, even in what's going on now. It is, and I think that's a very, very important point, really. It's actually thinking about everybody and how we're joined together. And that might sound strange when we're so-called isolating, but that actually has a huge amount of strength in it. Because it's not from, as you said, from fear or insecurity. It's more knowing that we are linked anyway.
Okay, so that's the key point, isn't it? The key point is to actually recognise that we are all interconnected all the time. In any case, you know, you can be in your study there, out in the countryside, and I can be out in the countryside here in West Australia, and yet we are connected. We're not only connected because we are talking on this interview. We're connected in any case. We share that connection. And that's true for everybody. So that's the bigger picture. The bigger picture is that we are connected, and you know, from that, there's an opportunity to or utilize that bigger picture in accessing ways around the fear, accessing ways of actually coping with all of that. So yeah, no, that's very well spoken. Thank you, John. So,
but you know, at the same time, Neil, one of the things I've loved about what I've been doing for the last 30 years is the joy that getting together, having a good time at an event, putting things on for people, it's the joy that you see in people from that experience. So I'm not ignoring any of that. That's a very much a joining together process as well. And you know that here in New Zealand, and in particular in Christchurch, you know, we've been through a couple of fairly large incidences, which are known internationally, you know, with the earthquake and then with the mosque shootings. And what I've noticed in the city, because I've been there often quite soon afterwards, is a real desire to come together, to take some ownership of the city again, to stand with your neighbours in an ever-growing cultural diverse Christchurch, in actual fact, and join together. It's quite a prime human being sort of a thing, you know, that happens. And so I don't really want to see what's going on in the supermarkets, because that's not quite the same. You know, the caring and the sharing and the pulling together and the looking out for each other, those sorts of awakenings that have occurred through those sorts of incidences. Now we have another opportunity in a different sort of a way, and it's going to be interesting to see how we do and what comes out of it. And I'll say again, it's almost like there's a bit of a shock floating around, and we'll see how I and others act in that situation.
Okay. So you're talking about the potential for a flowering of community in a different way. And much as after the mosque shootings in Christchurch, or the earthquake, which flattened the place, that people around the world don't know about it, but it destroyed, you know, much of the city. And you know, you're saying you were on the ground there soon after the events, and able to see the way in which the community actually really pulled together. So you know, I agree. It's going to be fascinating to see what comes out of this, you know, the corona pandemic, and just see how people actually are able to come together, and that urge to come together, particularly in the face of, this recommendation about being at a distance with one another. So it's both. You've got two messages there. One is to actually have this inner resource, inner resilience, and inner capacity to actually be complete in and of yourself, but also from that place to actually be able to connect out to other people and to form community as well. So it's a parallel message that you got running there, and I think it's great. It's a wonderful observation that you're making.
Yeah, well, I mean, one of the terms used here, it is about externally considering, isn't it? And that is a strength as well. So, I mean, where does that come from? It comes from love, really. So these are big words, but that's where we're trying to go in a way. So right now, I see the words and a desire for people to go in these directions. So we'll see what happens. But it is about externally considering other people, or else people wouldn't be willing to shut themselves down. Really, I mean, there could be a riot and say, damn this, I'm not going to do that. But it is because, hopefully, of external considering rather than just fear for yourself. That's the difference. If you just have fear for yourself, that's a totally different motive from externally considering somebody. So rather than me going and seeing a grandchild or whatever, if I'm thinking about their situation and that family situation, well then I can use my inner resource and do okay just here.
Okay.
For a time,
sure. John, I wonder if you could imagine yourself that you had a mount that you could go and stand on and give a message to the masses. What would your message be to the masses?
Whoa. That's a big one. I don't want to be a politician and say, look after each other, love you, but that is part of it. But it is also to take this opportunity to look at the bigger picture, really, and that has to be something to do with Mother Earth and where we are and what's going on here and that bigger intelligence. So the message would be to wake up, really, to wake up to that, and to think about that, and not be stumbling along with the blinkers on. I don't want to stand on the mountain and preach, but that we have a wake up call. We have a wake up call here, and my main fear would be that we'll get through and everything will be exactly the same.
Okay.
Part of me would like there to be some change, but it doesn't. But it's an inner change. It's a change amongst ourselves, but it starts individually and collectively.
Cool. Look, that's wonderful, John. Thank you so much. And John Searle, and a bit north of Auckland. Thanks very much for your time. And if you have some links to resources that you'd like to share with people, I know you look after a publishing company, and you're very welcome to reach out with some of the sort of philosophical stuff which is sitting behind your approach, and we'll certainly place that on the website associated with this video, and people can get a bit of that good magic going on too. So thanks very much, John. It's a really great talk, and appreciate it. Thank you.
All the best. Okay. Ciao.